Hi, I'm Yulia, and you're watching my channel, Rebels and Revolutions. Sorry if my pronunciation is a bit off today. I just got my braces on. I am bursting with excitement, as today we embark on a journey that will take us to one of the most fascinating civilizations, Persia, or as most of us know it, Iran. And yes, today we are talking about the Iranian Revolutions. Why revolutions, plural? Wasn't there only one Iranian Revolution of 1978? If you Google this subject, this is indeed the only revolution that will come up, and the one that most of us think of when the issue is mentioned. Of course, the Revolution of 1978 is a major focus of our discussion. We will save it, however, for part 3 of our series. In order to understand what happened in 1978, we need to talk about the 1906 revolution, which created the first constitutional monarchy in Iran, and the coup of 1925, which led to the establishment of the authoritarian Pahlavi dynasty. This is what we'll talk about today, once I finish my introduction. The second part of my series, and the most intriguing I must add, is the CIA MI6-backed coup, known in the US as Operation Ajax and in Britain as Operation Boot, which led to the deposition and arrest of a hugely popular and democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh. This action of the US and British intelligence services derailed political development in Iran and ultimately contributed to the Islamic Revolution of 1978, which will be the topic of our third installment. I guess you might wonder, why did I pick this topic? Let's admit that many of us in the United States don't have the best understanding of or appreciation for Iran as an entity, and at the very least are very cautious about its current regime. This lack of understanding and affection is fully reciprocated on the Iranian side. Both sides refer to each other by highly endearing terms, such as the Great Satan or the Axis of Evil. This situation does not seem to change with time. So where does it leave us? We can continue to label each other with moderately unpleasant words, or we can look at history objectively in order to see that at different times, both sides behave poorly towards each other. More correctly, it was representatives of respective governments that behaved poorly. So, though there are plenty of reasons for mistrust, a proven way to build back trust is to study the history of how we got to this point, acknowledge it, and move on. The future does belong to my generation, and I would love to grow up in an environment where both sides can move forward and focus on the future rather than the past. Perhaps my small effort to look back at this conflict may prove to you guys that both sides, assisted by other players like Britain and Russia, made tremendous errors, and the best way for us to move forward is to recognize those mistakes. So, here is the big question. Why did I call the first episode The Great Game? Well, the Great Game was the name of a political and diplomatic confrontation between Great Britain and the Russian Empire over Afghanistan and other neighboring territories in Central Asia. It also had direct consequences in Persia, which was sandwiched between those powerful forces. Playing that game planted the seeds of multiple revolutions that shook Iran in the 20th century. Many believe that it all started in December 1891 in the harem of the Iranian Shah Nasir al-Din, a member of the Qajar dynasty. Being a modest ruler, Nasir al-Din viewed himself through the eyes of Tina Turner as simply the best. Maintaining a huge court with 1,600 wives and concubines. On occasion, he would go on a relaxing European vacation, which would empty the Iranian treasury in a hurry. But he knew that he deserved the best and kept spending like there was no tomorrow, while Iranians were getting more and more desperate by the day. In order to fund this lifestyle, he began selling natural resources and business concessions to foreign firms. In 1891, he sold the Iranian tobacco industry for only £15,000, if I recall correctly. According to the terms of this concession, every farmer who grew tobacco was required to sell it to the British Imperial Tobacco Company, while every smoker had to buy it from an authorized shop, which was part of the British Imperial network. Back then, as well as now, Iran was a country of smokers. Large numbers of tobacco growers who made a living in this business saw their livelihood disappearing overnight. The country erupted with nearly uniform protests. Even the country's leading religious figure, Sheikh Shirazi, endorsed their protests, issuing a fatwa, or religious order, declaring that as long as the tobacco industry remained in the hands of foreigners, smoking would constitute defiance of the 12th Imam. May God hasten his appearance. Almost all who heard it obeyed, and even the 1,600 wives of Nasir al-Din Shah who loved to smoke quit. The Shah backed down and canceled the concession. The people, on the other hand, realized the power they held. This was just the beginning of their defiance of the authority of the Shah. I think the tobacco revolt marks the beginning of the end of the Iranian absolute monarchy and ushered in a new political age. After his son, Mustafa, continued the same winning course, pushing Iran further and further into poverty and debt. The country was dominated by foreigners and crippled by inflation and unemployment, and Iranians of all political persuasions had enough. In 1906, inspired by the Russian Revolution of 1905, which brought the semblance of parliamentary limits to Tsar Nicholas's power, Iranians insisted on establishing a national consultative assembly. In order to avoid a full-blown revolution, the Shah reluctantly signed a decree that established the Majlis, Iranian parliament. That was the Iranian Magna Carta. With Russia taking a temporary break from its southward imperial expansion as a result of the Revolution of 1917, Britain remained the only game in town, or in Persia to be exact. British interests in maintaining control of Persia especially perked up upon the discovery of oil. Since oil played such an integral part throughout the Iranian story in the 20th century, I will take just a minute of your time to answer one question that I had when I started my research on this topic. How exactly did Brits end up owning and controlling the entire petroleum business in Iran? In 1901, Mustafa al-Din Shah granted a 60-year petroleum concession to William Knox D'Arcy for only, wait for it, 20,000 pounds, which in today's dollars would be equivalent to less than $3 million. On the 31st of July, 1907, D'Arcy withdrew from his private holdings in Persia and transferred them to the British-owned Burma Oil Company. The company grew slowly until World War I, when Persia's strategic importance led the British government to buy a controlling share in the company, basically nationalizing British oil production in Iran. At the end of World War I, fearing the instability brought by the Russian Revolution, Britain was in desperate need of a strong man in Persia, a man who could ensure law and order, promote Western values, and protect British interests, a man they could do business with. And Reza Khan, the Minister of War, was exactly what the British doctor ordered. Soon after the war, Reza Khan participated in a coup, which elevated him to the status of Prime Minister. In 1925, he consolidated power and became a monarch, reigning until 1941 as Reza Shah Pahlavi. He was a controversial figure, bringing Iran much-needed economic and social reforms, yet pushing things forward too fast. He built railways, created a modern judiciary and educational system, imposed changes in traditional attire and religious customs and morals. At the same time, he antagonized large landowners and clergy, who bitterly opposed his efforts to turn Iran into a Western-style society. By 1941, with the outbreak of World War II, the Persian Gulf and Iran's vast oil resources became critical for the success of the British Navy. Iran declared itself neutral, but Reza Shah, who established strong cultural and technological ties with Germany, was perceived as problematic by the Allies. To add insult to injury, Reza Shah rejected British and Soviet demands to expel German residents from Iran. In response, in August of 1941, the Allies launched Operation Countenance, invading Iran with the main goal of securing Iranian oil fields and its neutrality. While the decision remains controversial up to this day, Iran did become an instrumental point in administering Allied land lease aid to the Soviet Union, which greatly helped the USSR to survive during the most critical months of the war. Once they occupied the country, the Allies orchestrated yet another revolution, forcing the Shah to abdicate his throne in favor of his young son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who was just 22 years old when he assumed his position as the Shah of Iran. Domestically, he took a very hands-off approach in government, allowing power to concentrate in parliament, which became unstable and increasingly corrupt. The young monarch needed a strong support as he continued with the westernization efforts of his father. His upbringing made him deeply anti-communist, and he began to frantically search for allies in his fight against communism. For a brief period, he attempted to align himself with the clergy, his father's old nemesis. They were also anti-monarchist, making them unlikely partners due to their opposition to social reforms. Many members of the clergy became increasingly radicalized, drifting further and further from the Western-focused monarchy of Iran. Among the outspoken members of the Shiite religious establishment was the young Ayatollah Rouhani. He found social reforms inconsistent with Islamic law. While he attracted only a handful of like-minded followers, he was destined to become the most powerful force in the story of 20th century Iran. On the 28th of April, 1951, after the Majlis nominated Mohammad Mossadegh, the Shah appointed him as prime minister. A brilliant orator, passionate and selfless promoter of Iranian sovereignty, Mossadegh was a sophisticated member of the royal family, the first Iranian to earn a Doctor of Law degree from a European university, and a man who never accepted salaries in any of his government posts. If he would have a chance to become the force of reconciliation, Iranian society might have progressed in a very different way. But the Iranian people were deprived of this opportunity under his leadership, ironically, by the country that always claims to be the ultimate champion of democracy, the United States. And that is where the story of the next dark revolution in Iranian history begins. Next time, we will explore an incredible and depressing story of the anti-Mossadegh revolution, orchestrated by the American CIA and the British MI6. Please join us next time to watch Operation Ajax in action. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and join us next time. And thank you for supporting my channel, Rebels and Revolutions.